The drop pods fell like burning stars through the red sky. Inside each metal shell, a young Krathan warrior waited alone. This was the trial that would prove their worth. Survive 30 days in the Ashgrave wastes, or die trying. No help, no mercy. Only the strong would return. Tajin felt his pod slam into the ground. The impact rattled his bones. He was 9 feet tall with striped fur and claws that could tear through steel. His father was War Chief Vekros, the greatest warrior in the Empire. Everyone expected Tajin to be the best. He had to prove he could hunt alone. The pod door hissed open. Heat hit him like a wall. The wastes stretched before him, a nightmare of black rock and red sand. Volcanoes smoked in the distance. The air burned his lungs. He grabbed his ceremonial blade and stepped out. The pod door sealed behind him. There was no going back. Far across the wastes, 4 other cubs landed in their own pods. Hieri was smaller and faster than the others. Yunho had scars across his face and anger in his eyes. Soman was the youngest, barely old enough for the trial. Daehyun was massive, slow, but incredibly strong. Each one was alone. That was the rule. That was how Krathan became warriors. 3 days passed. Tajin hunted small creatures and found water in the shadow of canyon walls. The days were so hot his skin burned. The nights were so cold he could barely move. This was survival. This was what his people had done for thousands of years. On the 4th day, Tajin tracked a wounded ashclaw. These beasts were the apex predators of the wastes. Killing one would bring him great honor. He followed the blood trail into a narrow canyon. But something was wrong. The blood trail was too neat, too organized. Then he found the ashclaw. It was dead, but it had not died from wounds. Someone had killed it with traps. Rope snares, sharpened stakes, weight-triggered rocks. This was not how Krathan hunted. This was not natural. Tajin heard a sound behind him. He spun around, claws extended. A figure stood in the shadows of the canyon. Small, weak-looking. It stepped into the light. A human Tajin had seen humans before. They were prey animals, soft skin, no claws, no real strength. The Empire captured them from a planet called Earth and sold them as slaves. This human wore armor made from scraps of metal. His face had scars. His eyes were tired but sharp. The human spoke in the common language. His name was Jiho Park. He did not run. He did not beg. He just stood there, looking at Tajin with calm eyes. "You are prey," Tajin said. "How are you still alive?" Jiho smiled slightly. "Because I learned something your people never did. Lone hunters die hungry. You can kill me right now. Or you can learn why I am not dead yet." Tajin could have killed him easily. One swipe of his claws. But something stopped him. This human had survived where many Krathan cubs died. How? He needed to know. Jiho led him to a shelter built from the wreckage of a crashed ship. Inside was food, water, and tools. Everything organized, everything purposeful. Jiho showed Tajin how to purify water so it would not poison him. How to set traps that used the environment instead of strength. How to treat wounds properly so they would not get infected. Survival is not about being the strongest, Jiho said. It is about being the smartest, about adapting. By the 5th day, Tajin was still there. His pride told him to leave. His father would be ashamed, but his stomach was full for the first time since landing. His wounds were healing, and he was learning things no Krathan had ever taught him. On day 12, another cub appeared. Hieri had been tracking the same water source. She climbed over a ridge and froze. Tajin, the strongest of their group, was sitting next to a human. Not hunting him, not killing him. Sitting with him like they were equals. Hieri's first instinct was to attack. This was wrong. Against everything they had been taught. But Tajin stood up and raised his hand. "Wait," he said. "Listen to what he has to say." Jiho offered her food and shelter. Hieri was suspicious, but she was also dying of thirst. She accepted. That night, sitting around a small fire, Jiho told them about Earth, about how humans survived not by being the strongest, but by working together, by forming groups, by helping each other. We call it a pack, Jiho said. Alone, a human is weak. Together, we conquered our entire planet. We became the dominant species, not because we had claws or strength, but because we had each other. The concept was alien to them. Krathen fought alone, proved themselves alone, died alone if they failed. But sitting there, fed and warm, both cubs began to wonder, what if their way was not the only way? Day 18 brought violence. Yunho attacked the camp at dawn. He was furious. He had been tracking them for days. Seeing them together made his blood boil. This was betrayal. This was weakness. He charged at Jiho, ready to kill the human and restore honor. But Jiho did not fight back. He did not run. He simply stood there and pointed at Yunho's leg. That wound is infected, Jiho said calmly. The green color spreading up your thigh, the fever making you sweat. You have maybe 3 days before it kills you. You can kill me if you want, but then you die alone out here. Yunho looked down. He had been ignoring the pain, pretending he was strong enough to overcome it. But Jiho was right. The wound was worse than he thought. Jiho treated the wound. He cleaned it, applied medicine made from local plants, and wrapped it carefully. Yunho sat in angry silence, but he did not leave. Pride was important, but living was more important. By day 24, all 5 cubs had gathered. Somin and Daehyun found the camp by following signals that Jiho had taught the others to leave. Scratches on rocks, arranged stones, simple signs that said safe place this way. For the first time in the history of the trials, all 5 cubs were together. Not competing, not fighting. Together. Jiho began teaching them to work as a unit. Hand signals for communication, coordinated hunting patterns, how to watch each other's backs, how to rotate guard duty so everyone could sleep safely. These were human military tactics, things Jiho had learned in Earth's special forces before he was captured. The cubs learned fast. Their natural strength and speed combined with coordinated tactics made them incredibly effective. When a massive Titan ash claw attacked the camp on day 28, they faced it together, alone. Any one of them would have died. The Titan was 3 times the size of a normal ash claw. Its claws could cut through stone. Its roar shook the canyon walls. But the cubs did not face it alone. Daehyun drew its attention from the front, his massive frame holding a shield made from scrap metal. Hyeri and Somin flanked it from the sides, striking at its legs. Yunho climbed the canyon wall and leaped onto its back. Taejin went for the throat while it was distracted. Jiho coordinated everything, calling out positions and timing. The beast fell. All 5 cubs stood over it, breathing hard but alive. They looked at each other and understood something their ancestors never had. Together, they were unstoppable. Day 30 arrived. Extraction Day. The cubs walked to the pickup point together, in formation. Jiho walked in the center, calm and confident. They were not ashamed. They were proud. The extraction ship landed. The door opened. War Chief Vekros stood there with the Council of Elders. They stared in shock and horror. 5 cubs, all alive. All together, following a human. This had never happened. This was not possible. This was wrong. Vekros looked at his son. Taejin stood tall, meeting his father's eyes without shame. Behind him, the other cubs formed a protective line around Jiho. "Explain this," Vekros demanded. Taejin spoke clearly. "We completed the trial, all of us, together. That has never been done before." "You were supposed to survive alone," Vekros roared. "This human has corrupted you, made you weak." "No," Hyeri said quietly. "He made us stronger." Vekros ordered his guards to seize Jiho, to execute him immediately for corrupting the sacred trial. But the cubs moved. They stood between the guards and Jiho. 5 young warriors, barely trained, refusing to obey the war chief. The standoff lasted only seconds, An insectoid elder named Jiwan stepped forward. "Wait," she said in her clicking voice. "The council must investigate this. We cannot execute without understanding what happened here." Vekros wanted to argue, but council law was clear. Jiwan had invoked the right of inquiry. The execution would have to wait. Guards surrounded them all. Jiho and the cubs were taken into custody. As they boarded the ship, Jiho looked back at the wastes. He had survived. But the real trial was just beginning. On the ship, separated into different holding cells, each cub faced the same question in their mind. They had broken the most fundamental rule of their culture. They had chosen cooperation over individual glory, and they did not regret it. Not for a second. The spire hung in space above the Krathen homeworld like a massive blade. It was the heart of the Velric Empire. Here the council made laws. Here justice was decided. And here Jiho and the 5 cubs waited to learn their fate. They were separated immediately. Each cub placed in a different detention cell. Jiho locked in a reinforced chamber deep in the station. The Empire wanted to break whatever bond had formed between them. They wanted the cubs to betray the human. Taejin sat alone in his cell. The walls were white and clean, so different from the red dust of the wastes. A door opened. His father entered. War Chief Vekros looked at his son with disappointment and anger. "You have shamed our family," he said. "You followed a prey animal like a domesticated pet." "I survived," Taejin replied. "We all survived. That has never happened before. You were supposed to prove your individual strength, not corrupt yourself with weakness." Vekros slammed his fist against the wall. "Tell the council that the human used some kind of drug or mind control. Tell them you were forced. I can save you if you denounce him." Taejin met his father's eyes. "No, Jiho did not force us. He taught us, and I will not lie about that." Similar conversations happened in other cells. Here he was asked if Jiho had threatened them. Yunho was offered freedom if he would testify against the human. Selman was told she was too young to understand what had happened. Daehyun was pressured to admit he had been manipulated. All of them refused. Every single one. Elder Jiwan watched the interrogations from a monitoring room. She was not Krathen. Her species, the Rylith, valued knowledge over strength. She found this entire situation fascinating. She began researching humans. What she found amazed her. Humans were not apex predators. They had no natural weapons. They were relatively weak compared to most spacefaring species, and yet they had dominated their entire planet. How? The answer was in their history. Humans formed groups. They worked together. They domesticated other animals and made them family. They built societies based on cooperation. Even their biology was designed for social bonding. They released chemicals in their brains that made them feel good when helping others. Humans did not just survive together. They needed to be together. It was not a choice. It was what they were. Jiwan went to Jiho's cell. He sat calmly on a metal bench, seemingly unbothered by his imprisonment. When she entered, he stood respectfully. "How did you corrupt apex predators?" she asked directly. Jiho smiled slightly. "I did not corrupt them. I taught them something they already knew deep down. That together they are unstoppable. You call it corruption, we call it friendship. And if the council releases you, then you will have 5 warriors who fight as one mind. Is that not what every military wants?" Jiwan considered this. The empire was vast but always at war. Resources were stretched. If coordinated tactics could make warriors more effective, it would change everything. But Vekros had other plans. He could not allow this human to destroy Krathen culture. He arranged a test. A public test that would prove the cubs were nothing without their human master. The arena in the spire was massive. Thousands of Krathen gathered to watch. The 5 cubs were brought out in restraints. Jiho was locked in a viewing cell where he could see but not help. Vekros stood in the command box. His voice boomed through speakers. "These cubs claim they completed the trial through cooperation. Let us see if that cooperation works without their human puppet master. They will face 5 champion warriors, alone as they should be." 5 massive Krathen warriors entered the arena. Each was a proven champion. Each had decades of combat experience. They looked at the cubs with contempt. This would be a quick fight. The restraints released. The cubs stood together, naturally forming a defensive circle. The champions charged, each attacking individually as Krathen always did. What happened next shocked everyone watching. The cubs moved with perfect coordination. When a champion attacked Taijin, Daehyun blocked from the side while Hyeri struck from behind. When another warrior charged Somin, Yunho intercepted while Taejin created an opening. They used hand signals Jiho had taught them. They rotated positions. They covered each other's weaknesses. The champions were confused. They had never faced an enemy that worked together like this. One warrior would commit to an attack only to find himself surrounded by 3 cubs. Another would dodge one strike only to run into another. In 15 minutes, all 5 champions were defeated. Not killed, but disabled. The cubs had fought with restraint, using just enough force to win. Not one cub had fallen. The arena fell silent. This was impossible. 5 cubs with minimal training had defeated 5 champions, and they had done it without their human. Jiho watched from his cell with quiet pride. They had learned well. They did not need him to fight. They needed him to teach. And now they could teach others. The council gathered in emergency session. The chamber was filled with beings from across the empire. The debate was fierce. Vekros argued for execution. This human is dangerous. He has the power to subvert our culture. To make us weak, we must eliminate him before this infection spreads. But military commanders saw something different. Those cubs defeated champions twice their age. If we could apply these tactics across the military, we could conquer systems that have resisted us for years. Jiwon spoke carefully. We face a choice. We can kill this human and pretend this never happened. Or we can learn from him, study his methods, perhaps improve them. The cubs proved today that cooperation does not make them weak. It makes them stronger. The debate lasted hours. Finally, a compromise was reached. Jiho would be allowed to train a full Krathen squad under close supervision. If his methods worked in real combat, they would be studied further. If they failed, he would be executed. The cubs immediately volunteered to be his squad. They called themselves Pack 1, but Vekros was not finished. He could not openly defy the council, but he could arrange accidents. He contacted loyal warriors and gave secret orders. Jiho would not survive long enough to train anyone. An assassination would look like a tragic incident. Yeri discovered the plot 3 days later. She had always been observant, always watching and listening. She heard whispers in corridors. She saw suspicious movements near Jiho's quarters. She gathered the other cubs immediately. "They are going to kill him tonight," she said. "We have to act. If we interfere, we will be arrested," Somin said nervously. "Maybe worse. Then we get arrested," Yunho growled. "Pack does not abandon Pack." Taejin looked at each of them. They all nodded. The decision was made. That night they moved through the spire like shadows. Hyeri led them through maintenance corridors she had memorized. Daehyun carried extra equipment. Somin had stolen access codes. Yunho and Taejin took point positions. They reached Jiho's detention level just as Vekros's assassins arrived. 6 trained killers against 5 cubs. The cubs should have run. Instead, they attacked. The fight was brutal. The assassins were skilled, but the cubs fought with perfect coordination. They had trained together for weeks now. They knew each other's movements instinctively. Every strike was backed up by another. Every defense was covered by the pack. Taejin faced his father's personal guard, a massive warrior named Korath. They clashed in the narrow corridor. Korath was stronger and more experienced. But Taejin was not alone. Hyeri struck from the side, Yunho from behind. Korath fell, alarms blared. Security forces rushed to the scene. But they arrived to find the cubs standing over the defeated assassins, protecting Jiho's cell door. None of the cubs had run. None had abandoned their position. Jiwon arrived with military police. She looked at the scene and understood immediately. The cubs had broken protocol to save the human, and in doing so they had exposed Vekros's treachery. The investigation was swift. The assassins confessed under questioning. Vekros had violated council decree. His position as war chief was stripped away. He was placed under house arrest pending further judgment. In the council chamber, Taejin stood before the assembled leaders. They asked him why he had defied orders, why he had risked everything for a human. His answer was simple. Because he is Pack, and Pack is forever. The council officially recognized Pack 1 as an experimental military unit. Jiho was given the title of tactical instructor. They would be sent on a real mission to prove their worth in combat. As they left the chamber, Jiho walked beside the 5 cubs. They moved naturally into formation around him. Not because he ordered it, not because they feared him, but because that was what family did. Somewhere in the station, Vekros watched from his confinement. He saw his son walking proudly with a human and 4 other cubs, walking together like a unit, like a pack. And for the first time, doubt crept into his mind. What if he had been wrong all along? The planet Zareth 4 was a nightmare. Underground tunnels stretched for hundreds of miles beneath the surface. Rebels hid in the darkness, fighting against Imperial taxes and control. 3 traditional Krathan units had already tried to clear the tunnels. All 3 had suffered terrible casualties. Now Pack 1 was being sent in. Their first real combat mission. The dropship landed at the Imperial forward base. Commander Hanel met them at the landing pad. He was a veteran warrior with gray fur and countless scars. He looked at Pack 1 with obvious skepticism. 5 young cubs and a human. This was what command sent him? You will stay in the rear, Hanul ordered. Support roles only. My warriors will handle the actual combat. Jiho said nothing. He had expected this. Traditional commanders would not trust their methods. They would have to prove themselves. Pack 1 established their own camp and began preparations. Jiho taught them urban warfare tactics, how to clear rooms without getting ambushed, how to use mirrors to see around corners, how to communicate with hand signals in complete silence, how to move through tight spaces as a coordinated unit. The cubs practiced constantly. Yeri scouted the tunnel entrances, mapping approaches. Soman studied the rebel tactics from previous encounters. Daehyun tested equipment modifications that would work in confined spaces. Yunho and Taejin drilled close-quarters combat until it became second nature. On the 3rd day, Hanul launched his assault. 3 squads of traditional warriors charged into the main tunnel complex. They expected to overwhelm the rebels with superior strength and ferocity. The rebels were ready. Tunnels collapsed. Explosives detonated in kill zones. Snipers fired from hidden positions. The Krathan warriors fought bravely but individually, each one charging ahead, trying to be the first to claim glory. The rebels picked them off one by one in the darkness. By evening, Hanul's force was trapped. A tunnel had collapsed behind them. Rebel forces were moving in to finish them. Hanul sent a desperate message to base command. He needed immediate extraction or his entire unit would be wiped out. Command ordered a retreat. The trapped warriors were written off as casualties. It was the practical decision. Sending more troops would just mean more deaths. Pack 1 heard the order. They looked at each other. Then they looked at Jiho. Orders are to stand down, Taejin said quietly. Jiho met his eyes, then disobey. Those soldiers are Pack now, whether command recognizes it or not. We do not abandon Pack. The decision was unanimous. They geared up and moved out before anyone could stop them. Hieri led them through an alternate route she had mapped during her scouting. A narrow maintenance shaft that the rebels had not blocked. It was barely wide enough for the Krathan to squeeze through, but it would get them behind the rebel lines. They moved in complete silence. Hieri at the front, sensing vibrations and air currents, Soman behind her with a small device that detected rebel sensors. Daehyun in the middle, carrying extra supplies. Yunho and Taejin at the rear, watching for pursuit. Jiho coordinated from the center, using a comm unit to track everyone's position. They encountered their first rebel patrol 2 hours into the tunnels. 6 rebels armed with energy weapons. In traditional Krathan tactics, they would charge forward in a glorious frontal assault. Pack 1 did something different. Hieri threw a small light source down a side tunnel. The rebels turned toward it. In that moment of distraction, Yunho and Taejin dropped from ceiling handholds behind them. Taehyun blocked the forward exit with his massive frame. Soman disabled their communications. The fight lasted seconds. All 6 rebels were subdued with minimal noise. They tied the rebels up and moved on. No killing unless absolutely necessary. That was the rule. Soman used her technical skills to plant small charges in the tunnel walls as they went. Not to kill, but to create controlled collapses. To cut off rebel reinforcements when the time came. They reached Hanul's position just as the rebels were moving in for the final assault. Pack 1 came from behind, catching the rebels completely by surprise. But even then, they did not simply attack. Jiho activated the charges Soman had planted. The tunnels collapsed in strategic locations, cutting the rebel force in half. The rebels panicked. suddenly finding themselves trapped instead of being the trappers. Pack 1 moved through them like a surgical strike. Dahyun held a shield position, protecting the wounded Hanul and his warriors. Hyeri and Somin flanked, disabling weapons and communications. Yunho and Taejin struck with precise, non-lethal blows. Every move was coordinated. Every action had a purpose. The rebel commander watched in confusion as his overwhelming advantage evaporated. These were not individual warriors fighting for glory. This was something his people had never encountered. A unit that moved as one mind. In 30 minutes, the rebels were defeated. Not slaughtered, but captured. Hanul and his entire squad were alive. Pack 1 had not lost a single member. Hanul stared at them in shock. How did you do that? Taejin helped the older warrior to his feet. We did not do it alone. That is how. The journey back to base was slow. They had to move wounded soldiers and prisoners, but they moved together. Hanul's warriors, who had spent their whole lives fighting as individuals, found themselves naturally falling into Pack 1's formation. It just felt right. When they reached the base, the entire camp was stunned. The warriors written off as dead had returned, not only alive but victorious, and they had been saved by the experimental pack that everyone had dismissed. Command had no choice but to acknowledge the success. They ordered Pack 1 to lead the next operation. The assault on the rebel headquarters. Jiho sat with the cubs that night, planning the assault. But this time he was not alone. Hanul and his squad leaders joined them. They wanted to learn. They wanted to understand how coordination worked. We train to be the strongest individual, Hanul said, but you make the entire unit strong. How do we learn this? By trusting each other, Jiho answered simply. By understanding that your battle brother's survival is as important as your own glory. By fighting for the pack, not for yourself. Over the next week, Pack 1 trained 3 additional squads in coordinated tactics. The Krathan warriors were resistant at first. Everything in their culture told them that individual strength was supreme. But they had seen the results. They had been saved by methods they did not understand. They were willing to try. The assault on rebel headquarters was coordinated across 4 squads. Pack 1 took point, leading the way. 3 traditional squads followed, but now they moved as units instead of individuals. They covered each other. They communicated constantly. They worked together. The rebels had expected another straightforward assault. Instead, they faced something completely new. 4 squads attacking from different angles, perfectly synchronized. When one squad was engaged, another flanked. When rebels tried to reinforce, a 3rd squad cut them off. The 4th provided cover and support. It was not a battle. It was a surgical operation. The rebel headquarters fell in 6 hours. Command had estimated it would take 3 weeks of bloody fighting, but victory came with a cost. During the final push into the rebel command center, an explosion caught Pack 1 by surprise. A hidden bomb, triggered by the rebels in a desperate last move. Jiho was closest to the blast. Yunho saw it happen in slow motion. Without thinking, he threw himself forward, pushing Jiho out of the way. The explosion hit Yunho instead, throwing his massive body against the wall. The other cubs rushed to him. Yunho was alive but badly wounded. Broken ribs. Internal bleeding. Burns across his back. He looked up at them, blood on his lips, and smiled. Pack protects pack, he whispered. They got him to the medical bay immediately. The doctors worked through the night. The other cubs stayed outside, refusing to leave. They sat together, waiting. Worrying, hoping. Jiho sat with them. He looked at these young warriors who had saved his life multiple times, who had risked everything for him, who had changed the way an entire empire thought about strength. This is what pack means, he said quietly. We share victories and pain. We celebrate together and we suffer together. Yunho understood that better than any of us. Yunho survived. It took weeks of recovery, but the tough warrior pulled through. When he finally woke up, the first thing he saw was his pack gathered around his medical pod. All of them. Not leaving until they knew he was okay. The victory on Zareth 4 made waves through the empire. Pack 1 was decorated with high honors, but more importantly, Command authorized the expansion of pack training. Jiho would train additional units. The tactics that had seemed so alien were now being studied and adopted. Hanul personally requested that his entire squad be retrained under pack methods. Other commanders began making similar requests. The change was happening. Slowly, but it was happening. But not everyone was happy about this change. Back at the spire, Vecro sat in his confinement. He watched reports of Pack 1's success with growing fury. His son was becoming famous, not for individual glory but for fighting alongside others, for following a human's teachings. Vecros was not alone in his anger. Many traditionalist Krathen felt the same way. They saw pack tactics as corruption, as weakness disguised as strength. They began gathering, talking, planning. A movement was forming, a resistance against the changes sweeping through their culture. 6 months passed. Pack 1's success had spread across the Empire. 12 pack units now existed, all trained by Jiho and his original cubs. Victory reports came from every front. The coordinated tactics were working. The Empire's military was becoming stronger, but success brought division. Many Krathen embraced the new ways. They saw how pack tactics saved lives and won battles, but many others resisted. They believed their culture was being destroyed, that individual glory was being replaced with collective weakness. Vecros had been released from house arrest. Technically, he had been punished enough for his crimes, but everyone knew the real reason. The council needed to prevent civil unrest. Keeping a former war chief imprisoned might spark rebellion. They were right to worry. Vecros immediately began organizing traditionalists, Krathen who believed that pack tactics were cultural contamination, that humans were corrupting their proud warrior heritage. That individual strength was the only true strength. The speech he gave to his followers was powerful. Our ancestors conquered this sector of space alone. Each warrior a force unto themselves. Now we follow the teachings of prey animals. We fight as groups like insects. We have lost what made us great. I say no more. I say we return to the old ways before this infection destroys us completely. Thousands rallied to his cause. Not just Krathen, but other species who valued martial tradition. The Empire was splitting. Progressive forces on one side, traditionalists on the other, and in the middle everyone trying to prevent full civil war. Pack 1 received orders to return to the spire. The council wanted them safe and close during the crisis. But during their journey back, Jiho received unexpected news. Intelligence had located another human, someone from his past, Minho Kang, his best friend from Earth, an engineer and medic who had been captured in the same raid that took Jiho. But they had been separated, sold to different slave markets. Jiho had assumed Minho was dead. He was alive. Held in a processing facility on a border world, Jiho went to the cubs immediately. I need to ask you something, he said, and I will understand if you say no. My friend is in a slave facility. I want to get him out. But doing so without authorization could get us all in serious trouble, especially now during this crisis. Yeri spoke first. We are going. No discussion needed. The others nodded agreement. Pack looked after Pack. That included Pack, who had not even met yet. The rescue was fast and clean. They hit the facility during shift change, when security was minimal. No killing, just quick, efficient extraction. They were gone before anyone realized what had happened. Minho was thin and scarred, but his mind was sharp. When he saw Jiho, tears came to his eyes. They embraced like brothers. Then Minho looked at the 5 massive Krathen warriors standing protective guard around them. You made friends, he said with a weak smile. I made family, Jiho corrected. Minho proved invaluable immediately. His engineering skills allowed him to improve their equipment. His medical knowledge helped train better field medics, and his technical mind found solutions to problems that brute force could not solve. But there was little time to celebrate the reunion. The crisis escalated. Traditionalist forces attacked a pack training facility on a border world. Young cubs in training were caught between veteran warriors who wanted to kill their instructors. Pack 1 was ordered to defend the facility, but this was different from fighting rebels or external enemies. These were their own people, fellow Krathen, warriors they should respect. What if we have to kill them? Someone asked nervously. She was still the youngest, still uncertain about so many things. Then we do not fight, Jiho said firmly. We defend. Defense only. No killing unless there is absolutely no other choice. Minho, can you create non-lethal weapons? Minho thought for a moment. Give me 6 hours and access to equipment. I can make stun weapons and riot shields from scavenged parts. When the attack came, Pack 1 was ready. They used shields to block attacks, stun weapons to disable enemies without killing them, defensive formations that protected the cubs in training without going on the offensive. The traditionalist warriors were confused. They attacked with full force, expecting the pack warriors to respond in kind. But Pack 1 absorbed the attacks, redirected them, used the attackers' own momentum against them. It was frustrating. It was humiliating. But it was not deadly. Hours passed. The traditionalists grew tired. Pack 1 rotated defenders, staying fresh. Eventually, the attackers withdrew, not because they were defeated, but because they were exhausted from fighting enemies who refused to kill them. This pattern repeated across multiple locations. Pack units defended but did not attack. They subdued but did not kill. It drove the traditionalists crazy. How do you fight an enemy who will not act like an enemy? The conflict reached its peak when Vecros launched an assault on the spire itself. He gathered thousands of warriors. The goal was to capture the council and force them to ban pack tactics forever. 12 pack units stood against them. Hundreds of young warriors who had learned to fight together. They were outnumbered 5-1. Jiho coordinated all 12 packs from a command center. Minho had created a communication system that let them talk in real time. For the first time, Krathan warfare involved actual strategic coordination across multiple units. The battle for the spire lasted 3 days. Pack units used the station's structure to their advantage. They evacuated civilians while fighting rearguard actions. They set up choke points and crossfire zones. They communicated constantly, shifting positions to counter every traditionalist move. It was a masterclass in defensive warfare. The traditionalists had superior numbers and individual skill, but the packs fought as interconnected units. When one pack was pressed, others relieved them. When traditionalists broke through one position, they found themselves surrounded by 3 other packs. Vecros led from the front, as any good Krathan warrior should. He fought with incredible skill and rage, but his forces were disorganized. Each warrior fought for personal glory, not tactical advantage. They got in each other's way. They competed instead of cooperated. On the 3rd day, Vecros reached the council chamber. He burst through the door with his elite guard, but waiting for him was Pack 1, and in the center his son Tajin. "Stand aside," Vecros commanded. "Do not make me fight you." "I will not stand aside," Tajin replied. "And you taught me never to back down from a challenge." Father and son fought. It was not a spar. It was not training. It was real combat between 2 warriors with completely different philosophies. Vecros fought with traditional Krathan style. Powerful strikes. Aggressive attacks. Overwhelming force. He was stronger than Tajin. More experienced. By every traditional measure, he should have won, but Tajin fought with restraint. He had learned patience from Jiho. He did not try to overpower his father. He waited. He defended. He looked for openings that did not require killing. And when Vecros overextended on a particularly aggressive strike, Tajin saw his chance. A joint lock that Jiho had taught him, a pressure point that disabled without permanent damage. His father fell, conscious but unable to move. Tajin could have killed him. Traditional Krathan honor would have demanded it. But he simply stood over his father and said, "I win, and you live." That is the difference between us. The remaining traditionalist forces saw their leader defeated. Not killed, but defeated. The fight drained out of them. What was the point of continuing? The council ordered a ceasefire. All traditionalist warriors were taken into custody, but not executed. They would be given a choice: accept pack training and integration or retire from military service. No one would be killed for believing differently. In the medical bay where Vecros was being treated, Jiho came to visit. The former war chief looked at him with hatred and confusion. "You have made us weak," Vecros said. "Soft, dependent on each other." Jiho sat down calmly. "I have made you stronger. Alone, your best warrior fell to my student. Together, your cubs defended a station against an army. Which is weakness?" Vecros was silent for a long time. Finally, he asked, "What have you done to us?" "Given you family," Jiho replied simply. Over the following weeks, something unexpected happened. Many traditionalists, including Vecros, accepted pack training. They were skeptical. They were resistant. But they could not deny the results. Vecros himself trained under his own son. It was humiliating. It was against everything he believed. But slowly, grudgingly, he began to understand. Strength was not just about the individual. It was about what you could achieve together. The Civil War ended not with total victory, but with integration. The empire was changing. Pack tactics became standard training. The culture of individual glory was evolving into something new. But during all this, Elder Jiwan made a discovery. She had been researching Earth's location, studying imperial records of where humans had been captured. What she found horrified her. Thousands of humans were enslaved across the empire, scattered across dozens of worlds, working in mines, factories, fighting pits. Earth's colonies had been raided repeatedly. Entire settlements destroyed, survivors taken as slaves. She brought this information to Jiho. He sat in silence for a long time after reading the reports. His hands shook with suppressed rage and grief. The Garen sector was where the Empire sent beings it wanted to forget. 12 worlds of mines, factories, and labor camps. The worst conditions, the cruelest overseers, and thousands of human slaves scattered across all of them. The Liberation Fleet was massive. 50 pack units, 200 traditionally trained warriors who had accepted pack methods, support ships carrying supplies and medical equipment. And at the center of it all, Pack 1 and their human instructors, Jiho and Minho, planned the operation together. Minho handled logistics and technology. Jiho coordinated tactical deployment. They would hit all 12 worlds simultaneously. The slavers would not have time to organize resistance or execute prisoners. The cubs had grown since the Ashgrave Wastes. Taejin commanded respect from even veteran warriors now. Hayari had become a master strategist. Yunho's loyalty was legendary. Somin's technical skills rivaled Minho's. Daehyun was the rock that every pack built around. They were no longer cubs. They were leaders. The first wave struck at dawn across all 12 worlds. Pack units dropped from orbit with surgical precision. They had practiced this operation dozens of times. Everyone knew their role. Everyone trusted their packmates. The slavers were caught completely off guard. They expected individual warriors that could be picked off. Instead, they faced coordinated units that moved like machines. Processing centers fell in hours. Slave compounds were liberated before guards could even send distress signals. But the freed humans presented an unexpected opportunity. Minho approached them with an offer. They could evacuate to safety, or they could stay and fight to free others. Many chose to fight. Minho began training them immediately. Crash courses in pack tactics, basic combat, how to coordinate with Krathan warriors. The humans learned fast. They understood cooperation instinctively. It was in their nature. Soon, mixed units formed. Humans and Krathan fighting side by side. The Krathan provided strength and combat skill. The humans provided improvisation and technical knowledge. Together, they were incredibly effective. Jiho watched these mixed packs with pride. This was what he had always known humans could do. They made friends out of anyone. They turned strangers into family. Give a human someone to protect and they would fight with everything they had. For the cubs, working with humans was a revelation. They had only known Jiho and Minho, but now they met hundreds of humans, each one unique. Some were engineers like Minho, some were soldiers, some were farmers or teachers who had never fought before but learned quickly, and they all had the same quality, that same ability to bond, to trust, to form packs even with species that should be their natural predators. Harry described it perfectly when she said, "Humans see potential family in everyone they meet." Within 2 weeks, 11 worlds were liberated. Over 40,000 humans freed. Most chose to stay with the Liberation Force, helping to free others. The fleet grew not just in size, but in unity. Different species working together toward a common goal. But the 12th world, Garen Prime, was different. It was the sector capital, heavily fortified. 10,000 humans held in a single massive facility, and the slavers there had sent a message: attack, and they would execute every prisoner. The council ordered negotiations. Conventional military wisdom said a direct assault was too risky. But Jiho knew slavers. They would never voluntarily give up such valuable property. Negotiations were just buying time for the slavers to reinforce. He proposed a plan: fake negotiations while small teams infiltrated, disable the execution systems, then launch a full assault before the slavers realized what happened. Pack 1 volunteered for infiltration. It was the most dangerous role. If discovered, they would be trapped deep in enemy territory with no support. But they had done dangerous before. This was just another mission. Minho designed signal jammers that would prevent the slavers from communicating, small devices that could be planted throughout the facility. Once activated, the slavers would be blind and deaf. Their execution order would never reach the guards. The infiltration team included Pac-1 plus 6 human volunteers. They entered the facility disguised as supply workers. Minho had forged credentials and manifests that would pass inspection. Getting in was the easy part. Getting to the right locations would be harder. For 6 hours they moved through the facility, planting jammers, mapping security systems, locating where prisoners were held, identifying command and control centers, all while pretending to be simple workers. Salmon was the technical expert. She interfaced with computer systems, downloading facility layouts and security protocols. Yeri scouted patrol patterns. Daehyun carried equipment. Yunho and Taijin provided security. The humans blended in perfectly, helping them avoid suspicion. They were minutes from completion when a guard noticed something wrong. One of the jammers was visible where it should not be. He raised an alarm. Everything happened fast. The facility went to full alert. Guards rushed toward the infiltration team. The slaver commander gave the execution order. But when he pressed the button, nothing happened. The jammers were already active. His orders went nowhere. Outside, the main force heard the alarms. They launched the assault immediately, hours ahead of schedule. 50 pack units hit the facility from every direction. The slavers scrambled to respond, but their communications were chaos. They could not coordinate, could not call for help, could not organize a defense. Inside, Pac-1 fought their way toward the prisoner compounds. They faced heavy resistance. The slavers knew they were dead if they failed. They fought desperately. The cubs moved with practiced efficiency. Every movement coordinated, every action supporting the others. The human volunteers fought alongside them, matching their rhythm. When Daehyun blocked a corridor, human fighters covered his flanks. When Hyeri needed a door opened, human engineers bypassed locks in seconds. They reached the prisoner compounds and began evacuation. Thousands of humans flooding through corridors toward extraction points. Pack units formed defensive lines holding back slaver reinforcements while civilians escaped. But the slaver commander had one last card to play. If he could not execute the prisoners, he would kill everyone. He activated the facility's self-destruct, a fusion reactor overload that would vaporize everything within 10 miles. Minho detected it immediately. Reactor critical. We have maybe 10 minutes. Jiho made a decision. Get everyone out. I will disarm it. The cubs refused. Pack stays together, Taijin said firmly. Always. They raced toward the reactor core. Minho guided them through the technical systems while Jiho coordinated their movements. The timer counted down. 8 minutes, 7, 6. The reactor room was deep in the facility, heavily shielded. Only one entrance. When they reached it, slaver guards made a last stand there. Not because they were brave, because they knew the pack was their only chance of survival too. Help us stop it or we all die, Jiho offered. The guards looked at each other. Then they stood aside. Inside the reactor room, Minho and Soman worked frantically. The system was complex. Multiple fail-safes had to be disabled in sequence. One mistake would cause immediate detonation. 4 minutes, 3. Everyone worked together. Minho called out instructions. Soman handled the technical interface. Hyeri held diagnostic tools. Daehyun manually cranked coolant valves that had been locked. Yunho and Taijin kept watch, ready to defend if needed. Jiho coordinated everything, his calm voice keeping everyone focused. 2 minutes, 1 minute, 30 seconds. Sumin entered the final command. The reactor's emergency shutdown engaged. The countdown stopped with 14 seconds remaining. They stood there, breathing hard, alive, together. Pac-1 had saved everyone, not through individual heroics, but by working as one mind in multiple bodies. The liberation of Garen Prime was complete. All 10,000 prisoners freed. The slaver network destroyed, and most importantly, not through revenge or violence, but through coordination and determination. The freed humans formed a refugee fleet, over 50,000 strong. They had nowhere to go. Earth was still vulnerable, but they had each other. And they had allies now, Krathan warriors who fought alongside them, who called them Pack. The council formally abolished slavery across the entire empire. Pack philosophy demanded that all beings be treated with dignity. You could not enslave someone and call them Pack. The two concepts were incompatible. The Velric Empire renamed itself the Velric Coalition, a government based on cooperation between species, not conquest but partnership. Humans were granted full citizenship. Representatives from Earth were invited to join the council. Vecros, fully reformed by his time training with pack methods, spoke at the ceremony.
I fought against change.
I believed our old ways were the only ways. I was wrong. My son taught me that. A human taught me that. Strength is not found alone. It is found together. Jiho was offered the position of strategic advisor to the council, a role with power and prestige. He declined. I am a teacher, he said. That is what I do best. Let me train the next generation. Minho established a technical academy, a place where humans and Krathen learned together, where engineering met warrior training, where different perspectives combined to create innovation. Pack 1 remained active as a special operations unit, but now Hyeri commanded them. Taejin became an instructor, teaching new cubs the methods his human friend had taught him.